Hey everybody, this is Evan Abrams, and in this After Effects tutorial we're going to be creating a template for lower thirds that resizes depending on how big of a name we put into it. This is great if you're selling templates or you're giving them to clients who are going to open them up in Premiere and make use of the fancy new features with Adobe CC that allow you to edit templates in Premiere without opening them in After Effects. This is going to resize stuff in that bar. So if you've got a small name like Evan that has a beautiful 4 characters, or you have a really long name like What You Do Fikowski, then it's just going to change the size of that bar using some expressions, and it's going to be all good. So, like I said, we're talking about things that are in Adobe CC. I use CC 2014 in this tutorial, but the expressions we're using and all the things we do to the layers work in all previous versions. So if you make templates for, CS4 or whatever you make them for, then this will be helpful. And even if you don't make templates, I think you'll learn something about expressions and just have a good time. So let's get into After Effects and get making some lazy ass templates.
So we're here in After Effects, and before we get into the tutorialing and stuff, I want to get a few things out of the way. I want to first show you exactly what we're going to be creating in the end, so you know what we're driving for. And the second thing I want to do is address why all of the weird, little highlights in here are blue. Well, that is because in Adobe After Effects CC 2014, they think blue is better than yellow, and I think it looks kind of cool in both the pun and nice looking sense of the word. So what are we making? Well, we're going to make something that whenever I retype into this, it resizes this bar behind it. All right. So if I only put a few characters in, it's not that long. If I put a lot of characters in, it's longer. Why do I want a bar that automatically resizes? Well, that's because thanks to a new feature here in Adobe After Effects CC, I can go into the composition settings of things, go into the advanced, and make this into a proper template, which means that unlocked text layers, like this only text layer in here, will be editable in Premiere Pro, which is pretty great. Okay, so what does that mean? Well, it means that in Premiere Pro, I can import the thing once, and then I can duplicate it over here on the timeline. So I can go duplicate, which makes a new copy. And then when I go into this thing, you can see it says Evan right now, but I look in the effects controls, it's got a little thing here for where the text was at, and I can type in whatever. All right. And then it changes it. It changes it automatically. You can't tell because I can't show emotion with my voice very well, but I was very excited about what just happened. This means that if I create a template that I intend for a client to use or a customer to use, and I want to incorporate some kind of automatic scaling of something in here to match with what goes behind the words, which is helpful because maybe I want to see more of the frame. It just opens up some new dimensions to work with stylistically. That means that a customer or client doesn't need After Effects to have something that scales. Before, you would have had to design around this flaw. Like, what if someone has a 1,000,000 character name? Well, then you're going to have to design this to work with that. Or you're going to have to make it possible to scale this down, or that person needs to know a bit about After Effects. So what we're going to do is use expressions to link these things together. So let's get into After Effects and let's get producing this thing. You can see there aren't very many layers. In fact, to get to the core of what this thing is, we only need 2. So I'm going to create a new composition, call this template 2. I think that's how you pronounce that word. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make some text, and in this text, I'm just going to write example. I'm going to make the text black because I don't care that much. And then one of the things that we need to get out of the way right now is that expressions are going to be used to make this happen. If you're not comfortable with expressions, then this is the part of the tutorial you want to rewatch several times. Expressions allow you to cause functions like multiplication, division, functions like finding the average between things, so mathematical type functions, programming type functions. It also allows you to draw out variables and properties of layers. So let's say, for example, I wanted to know the length and height of a layer. I want to know how wide it is. I want to know how tall it is. I want to know the X and Y of that layer, right? So those are all words that we as people use to describe the size of something on a 2D environment. Well, if I want to get this to return that of a layer, let's say I make a new solid layer, right? And when you make a solid, it has a width and a height. And so I can make this like 500 by 500, or no, that's a bad example. Let's make it 500 by 600, okay? And I'm gonna make this gray. It doesn't matter. This is just an example. So here's a layer, and this layer has properties, and I want to have an expression tell me how wide this is. Well, how would I do that? Well, I'd need it to output that somewhere. So let me just use this text as an example. And I'm going to just hold down Alt and I click on the stopwatch here. And what I'm going to have this do is it's just going to output the width of this layer. So I pick whip to this. So it's thisComp.layer, and then this is just saying, look at this layer. Then I'm going to put a point, a period down here, and then width. All right. Now, that means it's going to just read out what the width of this layer is. Perfect. So we can get the width of a layer and stick it into something else. So it gives us something we can play with. So ideally, if a text layer behaved like other layers, then I would just need to type in the text layer dot width and then spit this out. Okay, so we've got some text that's displaying the width. It's, way to go. Thank you so much for that. I'm going to put this number up here. I'm going to create a new piece of text down here. I'm just going to blah, 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 type out a bit. Let's say, for argument's sake, this is going to be the text of our lower third. Well, I want to measure its width, right? So, all right, that means I would just replace this first part of the expression here with the width of this layer. So I'll just select that and then pick whip, and pick whip to soggy, whatever that says. Boom. So what is it saying? It's saying 1920. Well, 1920, I think that's wrong. That's got to be wrong. That can't be the width of this. The whole frame is 1920 pixels wide. And that's it. That's the problem with measuring the width of text layers using this expression. So what it's basically saying is it's going to look at the text layer, and text layers, just because of the way text needs to be rendered, it's actually referencing the entire size of the frame whenever it's thinking about looking at this text layer. So we need to pull a different number to use to make this work, all right? So anyway, we just saw you put a period and then you write something and then it's going to return a value related to that thing. So I guess that's lesson 1 about expressions here, but it's also a valuable lesson about the shortcomings of text layers. It'd be really great if that wasn't a problem, but it is a problem, so now we're going to deal with it, all right? So let me clear a bunch of this crap out. This text, I'm going to rename that to be text, and this is because once I open this up in Premiere, like here, I want it to have a field named text that I'm able to figure out. If you're making multiple things like this, you might want to call one, title, the other one subtitle, or a person's name goes here, or whatever, but that's totally up to you. Now, where do I want this to be positioned? Well, lower thirds should take place in the lower third of this thing. So, hopefully my screen recording is working well and you can actually see the things that I'm hitting to bring up all this stuff. But I'm going to click and drag out of the ruler up here, which was Command R to bring that up. And I'm going to put a line here along this third division. See, this is a third, that's a third, that's a third. My grid lines are showing me thirds, the proportion grid. So if I have a lower third, it's got to be below this third of the screen. Awesome. That sounds very excellent. Now I'm also going to look at the title and action safe. This is going to tell me how far down I should consider putting things, assuming we're working with a traditional tube TV, and thankfully everyone's eyes are now adjusted to look at that. So I'm going to stick this somewhere in between these two lines, all right, which would put it right here. Sure, that's good enough. And then how far left and right? Well, that action safe is going to help us out with that question as well. So starting right here, somewhere around there. Great, that's super good. So we've got this text, and this text says something, and we need to try to get this text to define the size of another layer. So let's get a layer for it to define. Let's use a rectangle. So make sure you have nothing selected. Double click up here on the rectangle tool, and it's going to create a shape layer with a rectangle the same size as what you've got going on. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to go into the rectangle path here, and I'm going to mess around with this by linking the position to the size. I actually do this a lot when I'm working with rectangles, just because of how I usually animate them. So I hold down Alt, I click on the position, it's going to bring up this thing here. Now I'm going to pick whip its position to the first part of its size. This is the horizontal of its size, all right? Now it's going to populate this with some expressions. It's going to say temp, a variable named temp, is equal to blah, 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 blah. That's all just saying, this part here is just saying, it's referencing this. So temp equals that, and that's what that long string of words means. And then the output is temp, comma, temp. All right, if I click out, what does that mean? It means its position is 1920, comma, 1920. I don't really want that. I want the second number to be 0, all right? That's because I want its position to not alter up and down at all. And I want temp, that variable temp, to be divided by 2. I want it to be divided in half. That means it's going to stick itself at the halfway point right on its anchor point here. But it's different than moving the anchor point. And I could go into all the reasons why, but the big reason is that I can now resize this, and if I start making alterations to the size, it just stays right here. I don't need to worry about where the anchor point is. I can keyframe the layer's position and anchor point as much as I want. I can move it around all sorts of places, and none of it will affect what I'm doing. So I'm going to move its position to be over here at 0 and comma, I guess 850. That's cool. I'm hitting U to look at all the crap inside here. And now I'm going to adjust the size here to be sort of where I want it to be. And I want this to go under here. Really, I'm going to use an expression to tell me what the size of this thing should be. So this size is going to be linked to an expression that is based on this text layer, and specifically this text layer's source text. All right. Now I've already typed this out once before, so just so I don't get it wrong, I'm going to pull it out of here. All right. And I'm just going to copy this. I'm going to paste it in here, and then we'll dissect what all of this means. So hold down Alt, click on the size here, and paste it in. And I'm just going to scrolling down. So what are we writing in here? Let's divide this out a little bit so we can see better. La la la. Okay, and probably zoom in on this a little bit, but whatever. So we're setting up some variables. All right. First variable is temp. It's the word temp. Good for it. Temp equals thisComp text layer dot source text. So this is just pointing to this. So that's really, you set up one variable that is that. Perfect. Now, what's S? Well, S, which we could name anything. This could be whatever we want, in which case we could just use a capital L because that stands for length a bit better. So capital L equals temp, so this layer, dot length. We're finding the length of this property. And the dot length is how many characters is it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It is 7 characters. That will return the number 7. So in this case, L equals 7. Okay, great. That's super good so far. All right. Now, the next line is X, whatever X is, horizontal movement, sure. X is going to equal 100 multiplied by 7 times 0.9. Now, why am I using these specific numbers? Well, that has a lot to do with the font, all right? the font that I'm using, its size and what font it is going to really determine what your numbers are in here. So what percentage of the number of letters, all right, in this case 90%, and then times that by 100. So, I mean, there's a lot of math in there, but it's going to net us a value that's going to mesh well when we put it into the next thing, which is 250 plus X, so plus this number, which is derived from the number of letters and how wide each of those letters are, and then comma value 1 in square brackets. Value 1 in square brackets is just the value that's in here. So that means I can change this to be whatever I so please. Perfect. So what happens when I start to change what's in here? It gets smaller. Awesome. That's exactly what we want. So let me just call up the old position on here. And if I stick this like here, it's going to be perfect. I think in these examples, this is in a different zone or something. But anyway, the point is, now when I edit this, this is changing as well. Okay. Some caveats though, if you want to make yours exactly like mine, you have to use the same font. And in fact, in order to make use of this technique, you have to use a very specific type of font. You have to use monospaced fonts, of which Letter Gothic Standard happens to be one. Now, a monospaced font means that each of the letters, numbers, decimal points, whatever, they all occupy the same horizontal space. If we change this to a different font, we could use a font like, yeah, this one's a good example. Notice how all of the things are not the same width. Period takes up a different amount of horizontal space than does anything else. But Letter Gothic Standard, everything takes up the same size. That's how we're able to mathematically link a variable that's based off of this standard size. So each letter is a certain width, and then that width times some math is going to net us a distance, okay? Now, what you want to change these distances to is really going to depend on what you are doing with them. So if I start increasing this flat value of 250 to like 350, I'm just adding a little bit more onto the end. It helps if I'm trying to position this in the middle, or if I want just a little bit at the end. This is basically doing that. The X part is what's causing that variable length to happen. So hopefully all of this has made sense. So now when I have this thing, I've made sure that I got the text layer here, I got the composition settings telling it in the advanced tab that it is a template. Okay, awesome. I hit OK on that. And then when I go into Premiere and I import it, right? So go in here, import this work file. I have template 2, it comes up here. I click OK, woohoo. I open it up, I double click on it, I open up that footage. I look at the effects controls. There's like some junk in here, junk, poop, whatever. You know, then I can edit that and it's all changing. It's doing that thing. It's doing that thing that we said it would do. Oh my God, that's so good. That is so good. That's what we wanted. You know, I said we would do it and then we did it. How awesome is that? And it hasn't even taken too much time. So that is the core that drives how this effect works. This is how you can link text to length. Now, everything else that I did is just trying to stay out of the way of that. So now a lot of your design considerations have to take into consideration the fact that this has some stuff in it that you don't want to fuck around with, and all of your animation needs to take that into account. So if I wanted to do like a horizontal move to have this bar like move from over here to over here, that would be tricky because I don't know if someone's going to enter in something that's way too long, which will make my starting keyframes, right? My keyframes, if I, you know, am moving this from right to left or left to right or any of those, I don't know if the width is going to work out. So you should probably, if you want to do that, limit yourself to using the scale property and using vertical position changes, or something else, you know, something that still uses standard widths and doesn't rely on this always being the same size. So as long as in your head you remember the size is going to change, we can do some stuff. So something I did was I messed with the position and scale of these things. So I just created keyframes, then I moved them ahead, and then I unlink the scale and I make this thing, you know, scale it down to nothing, move it down like this, and then I take these and I hit F9 to ease them. I grab these handles here in what is a speed graph. Yes, this is the speed graph. If yours doesn't look like mine, go to edit speed graph instead of edit value graph. This is a value graph. It's a speed graph. See why speed graphs are a little bit better. Anyway, grab those handles. Now you've got this going on. You know, maybe you want this to start way down here. Comes up like this. That's neat. What I did was I duplicated this, moved it above the text. I set the text to treat that as an alpha mat, and then I moved this a little bit like this. Then I changed this thing's color. You know, I made it white. I gave it a little drop shadow, the droppy drop shadow. Cool. So that's coming up. And then I made it go away in the reverse of how I brought it on. So, you know, I set some keyframes, and then, you know, a little while into the future, you know, this thing was down at 0 and this was up here. So that was fun. And then these, set them to linear keyframes. These I set to be a little bit more interesting by dragging the handles like this. So graph looks like that. Warp. So this goes nerp. As such, I think the text, I just did a little position change on that. So messed with the position. It's going to be here. It's going to be here. So just put that down a little. As it goes up a little, you know, so these types of things, you can copy keyframes and just put them wherever they need to go. You know, you can do all sorts of stuff. But then there's also like a fancy background that's in behind this thing. So that was made using Plexus, the excellent plugin Plexus. I don't even get paid for saying that, but I enjoy Plexus. I like using it to generate some junk. This is some junk. This is basically the project file will have this rendered, because I know not everyone has $200 to piss away on Plexus, so that's cool. But yeah, that's about it. The core of this is really that expression. This expression is going to be in the description. So it'll be in the description of this video. So if you need to simply copies and pastes this, then do it like it is. If you're writing it, some of the problems you might run into are things like forgetting your semicolons. You might get a lot of weird things where it says this is not a value. You just got to go back, take it slow. Remember, you know, what each of these things are. This is just indicating something. This is something about that thing. So periods are basically going a little bit deeper. So we're looking at this comp. Oh, what's inside this comp? Period. This layer is inside this comp. Period. The source text of that layer, right? You know, you could put all of this on one line if you want. If you want to make L equal to that, and then we'll just append length at the end of that. No difference. I just like to break it down so you can see one step at a time, which is helpful. But I think that'll do.
Well, I guess that's it. Thank you very much for watching. Hopefully we've all learned something about making templates, about expressions, about ourselves, about each other. Perhaps you've thought of a new economic thing. Perhaps you've figured out a new small business where you'll make templates and then resell them on the internet. Oh God, everybody's already doing that. But anyway, maybe this will help you out with some other stuff. If you've enjoyed watching this tutorial, there's a bunch more on this channel, and there's new stuff fairly often, so take a look through that. Subscribe to this thing if you like learning about After Effects and motion graphics, because that's really all I talk about here. If you want to check out some other tutorials you might be interested in, maybe some stuff dealing with the old text animator or animating text on paths or something like that, those could be fun. So check those out, links over here. If you have questions about this particular tutorial, leave them in the comments. Everybody does this at the end of their video, but I'm doing it to let you know that I'll try to respond to your questions about this video in the comments to this video, so then other people might have the same question. They'd look down there and they're like, oh, my question's answered, it's right down there, so good. So do that. If you want to just rap about After Effects and motion graphics in general, hit me up on the Facebook or on the Twitter at ECAbrams. Links to all that are in the description. And yeah, head on over to evanabrams.com if you want to check out project files and templates and stuff that are there. So thank you so much for watching again. You guys really make this all worthwhile, and hopefully you'll learn something. And if you subscribe, then I'll see you next time. Thanks again, and have a nice day.